Hello and welcome to Wasted Plotential, where we discuss the wasted potential of our favourite plotlines. Mortal 1 Kombat Chaos Reigns is a bit of a mess. There are several ways one could improve the story we were given, but they don't necessarily all fit together in one. I'll just let you make your own joke about the irony of that statement here. And so I'm going to just throw out several ideas without much in the way of structure and see what happens. Again, make your own joke. The first subject to address is, where the hell were those fusion fighters from the mid-credit scene that set up this expansion? Why the hell was Havik's army composed of lame chaos palettes and not fusions of characters that would really make things chaotic? Why does the Chaos Man's army have a mostly uniform colour scheme? They could even add new ones using parts and moves from the DLC cast. Even just for gameplay reasons, this would be more interesting, and since Havik does say he was on Shang Tsung's side in chapter 15, you'd expect him to say that the fusions are from his army and that this was his big contribution. But no, they swept all of that under the rug so we could have evil Kenji and Takeda. Lame. Second, the character chapters continue to hinder the storytelling, with our main team of Scorpion, Cyrax and Sector having either finished or at least had half of their chapter already before the mission even begins, leaving us to have AU, Rain and Tanya for the duration of the mission, right down to having Tanya defeat Noob instead of his brother or his lover. Also, Havik, who had the perfect chance to have a chapter here, gets nothing. So imagine a version of the existing story that drops Tanya or Rain's chapter and gives us Havik for chapter 17, taking down Kung Lao and Raiden, Empress Melina in her new costume, Geras, Liu Kang, and then Sub-Zero once he gives chase. Then Sector comes 2 chapters later to cap off the mission by defeating Noob. Third point, Mainline Havik. You'd think he'd get some presence in the plot, given it's about Scorpion leading a team against a Havik that's been gathering Haviks for a party, and main Havik got his face ruined by this very same Scorpion. He should be here as Titan Havik's general, empowered by Chaos, learning about the old Chaos Realm before Liu Kang erased it, and addressing what happened to Order Realm in his and Rain's arcade endings. Hell, Rain could even have been put into Scorpion's team to atone for his sins. Would certainly help make his death more impactful if it was a version we knew anything about, dying in atonement for the genocide he participated in. And on the subject of that Havik army, why don't they do anything? Imagine if the final chapter had a bunch of endurance matches, or a mega endurance match as the sub-boss, having the player fight a few dozen Haviks with a team of 3 or 4 characters trying to wipe out the enemy force before you lose all of yours. Next, Emperor Rain and Empress Tanya. Overall, these two felt out of place in the story, having no connection to the Lin Kuei or Havik. It's just generic multiverse stuff that, much to my chagrin, is not explored to any significant extent. They don't even get any closure in the ending. My first suggestion is to expand their backstory, i.e. explain it at all. The current "they overthrew evil Reiko and Li Mei" sucks. Why is this Li Mei evil? Who made this timeline? Why does Reiko not speak? Why do these two Edenians, who keep going on about Argus and Delia and show familiarity with Karo, never once actually mention Edenia? In my version, these two come from a timeline similar to that seen in MKX. The two aided Melina's coup, and since there was no Earthrealm intervention, Kotal eventually lost. Then, either Melina granted their wish to release Edenia from its merger with Outworld, or Rain's plot to weaken Melina through her use of Shinnok's amulet bore fruit, and they did it themselves. Either way, Edenia was once again its own realm, and the two became the new king and queen. This then leads to Titan Havik summoning Revenant Sindel and Kitana from that timeline to fight Tanya at the arena, the winner getting Edenia's throne. It also allows a fight against a Melina to have meaning for Tanya, whether it's an enemy to contrast with her ally back home, or the very same Melina she and Rain murdered to achieve their goals. But however it plays out, there is another change I'd make. Towards the end of Tanya's chapter, she fights Chaos Kung Lao and Liu Kang. When she fights Kung Lao, did you notice who his cameo is? Chaos Rain. Putting the obvious pun aside, why on earth does Tanya not even notice the variant of her husband who just died to save her? Wouldn't this make far more sense as a fight for her to have, ideally to close out the chapter, letting someone else deal with Noob? I'd have Rain try to tempt her to the ways of chaos, acknowledging the old water worship of Chaos Realmers, implying that she and her Rain were always bound to chaos. But instead of Cyrax for mere gameplay variety, Tanya still has Sector as her support since Rain died to save her too. She helps to keep Tanya's eye on the prize, and the two defeat Rain. Maybe Tanya kills him to complete her grieving process rather than simply not mentioning her husband again beyond one conversation after his death. Or Sector does it for her to show that this Sector has empathy, and sparing his wife this grief is how she honours Emperor Rain's sacrifice. Then Tanya would get a scene in the epilogue, meeting with main Melina, encouraging her to marry her Tanya, and or give her Rain a second chance. Either way, when she departs, she says she's going to meet with Karo, letting her fulfill her promise from earlier. Finally, and this is a more radical idea, I'd postpone Havik, or depending on how the content cycle was planned, not tease him at all. The DLC, as is, seriously hypes up Noob Saibot, but really makes him feel like an afterthought with but one scene as an antagonist, then has him just defeat Havik very anticlimactically, then it teases a more interesting fight that Gira's cockblocks. In my version, Noob is the central antagonist. Coming from another timeline, he plans to spread darkness through other realities alongside his chief ministers, Quan Chi and Ermac, allowing the DLC characters to have prominence. This Ermac is a fusion of Shiraidu souls instead of Edenian. Noob still captures his counterpart, but doesn't convert him. I've said it so many times, but they didn't have to turn Bi-Han into Noob again to have Noob on the roster now that the multiverse has been introduced. Scorpion's team here now includes Smoke and Takeda, bringing the full Shiraidu and Lin Kuei together to take down this evil Bi-Han. I'd also replace Soldier Johnny Cage. Like Tanya and Rain, too little was done with him to really warrant him tagging along. He doesn't even have that many funny quips. Instead, the NPC accompanying them here is either Harumi or an alternate Frost. This way, the full team feels more focused and not like one half a core theme, 1/3 an excuse for certain characters to get story chapters, and 1/6 where the hell is my World War II Sonya cameo skin Netherrealm. Along the way, the crew fight Noob's versions of themselves, with Sector and Cyrax using their cameo models over their fighter movesets, similar to Evil Janet Cage in Chapter 15. Maybe we can make a gag with Shang Tsung's actor voicing male Sector like in MK9. Evil Smoke is the cyborg version too, and he serves as Noob's cameo in the climax, possibly with a design derived from the 3D era to test the waters for a potential DLC cameo for him down the line. And of course we get Kuai Liang Sub-Zero, be that with Scorpion's moveset or just a Kuai Liang model over Bi-Han, the inverse of MK9. Frost can get the same treatment. Noob grants Sub-Zero the Dragon Medallion from the 3D era, boosting Bi-Han's power to new heights. Bi-Han acts as Noob's enforcer for a time, killing Frost or another temporary ally. But after failing to kill Scorpion, Noob tries something different. He forcibly merges with his counterparts, becoming a fusion of Noob Saibot and Sub-Zero, his new Black Ice capable of turning people into Black Ice zombies. This makes the final fight more unique than Havik with a couple of new moves in a canyon. On the player side, this can be a small-scale take on the main story's climax. You choose a character to accompany Liu Kang for the final fight, and your choices are the members of this team we've followed throughout. Scorpion, Smoke, Takeda, Sector, Cyrax, maybe even Kuai Liang Sub-Zero. Or the partner is Scorpion and your choice of fighter results in a different ending. If another Shiraidu is chosen, Bi-Han is deemed a lost cause and executed. But if a Lin Kuei joins Scorpion, they temper his rage, and Bi-Han is taken alive to be restored at a later time. Havik can then be teased again, revealing he's the one sending the invaders in invasions mode and was allied with Noob this whole time. Havik is being set up for another expansion or a sequel to allow the Chaos theme more time to be explored, with Hotaru, Darius and the main Havik getting big roles, as opposed to Havik feeling almost sidelined in his own story to make way for the Lin Kuei drama. And actually, there is one more thing, I lied, and be more chaotic than Havik was. The gender swap thing. First, whoever at Netherrealm has a thing for that needs to calm the fuck down. Second, it's one of the biggest things that requires an explanation in universe. Why did Liu Kang do this? Now, since these are codenames, it could be that these are new people, not the originals. Imagine Liu Kang confirming that he removed the old Sector and Cyrax from the Lin Kuei, Cyrax to keep him from suffering as he always has, and Sector to keep him away from power like he did with Shang Tsung and the others. This alone would make this baffling creative decision a lot easier to stomach because it makes no sense otherwise. And you can even use this to set up the idea of the Hourglass itself trying to keep things in line with how they used to be. It could even explain why so much of the multiverse lines up with Liu Kang's changes. As the true progenitor of the multiverse, Liu Kang's vision has influenced other Hourglasses, causing his alterations to crop up across the multiverse, including Shao's horns, Kuai Liang being Scorpion, and Sector and Cyrax being women. Second point, why do this to both of them? The two have always had a problem standing out from one another visually, aside from colour scheme. And I get that this game's Lin Kuei has a mostly uniform, but that didn't need to be a problem for these two. Imagine if they had gender swapped only one of them, letting the other remain as a man. The two would have unique silhouettes without breaking the uniform aesthetic, and you could still factor in one of the two being a new person to replace the old one. In that scenario, it would probably be male Cyrax and female Sector, because if Liu Kang only removed one from the Lin Kuei, it surely would be the corrupting influence. Of course, there's always another option to avoid the gender swap thing entirely. Let me tell you about Hydro. Hydro was Sub-Zero's partner in the Malibu comics from the mid-90s. He was a ninja with Aquamanti powers who was killed by Scorpion in the tournament. He's made it into several fan games over the years, but he'd be redundant to be included in the official games because we got a canon water ninja soon after in Rain. Mortal Kombat Legacy then featured him as a cyborg in the Sector and Cyrax episode. And then he was the basis for a tower consumable in MK11, which is a trait unique to him as all the rest derive from canonical characters. So, some fans argue that you can just make him a cyborg and that makes him unique from Rain. Maybe, but you know how MK fans latch onto the most minor of concepts until they become real. They demand a human version as well, then complain when Rain doesn't make the cut to avoid redundancy. I actually wonder if the reason they made Rain a mage with a staff, to the point that the files call him Rain Mage unlike everyone else who just has their name and nothing else, was so that they could introduce Hydro with more of an assassin style like Rain had in MK11. But anyway, there is a way to make all of this work while also satisfying the gender swap fetish running rampant at the studio. Introduce Hydro as a woman. Being a non-canon character, it's far less frustrating for fans if Hydro is the one getting this treatment than one of the official cyborgs. It also allows a human version to appear in future without just being Blue Rain. She's Girl Rain. She can be Madame Bo's daughter who is in love with Bihan, while Sector remains as the male character because you can't really have the Cyber Initiative without him. Cyrax can remain a cameo for now, but the lack of gender swapping means Sector doesn't need to be a cameo to preserve his classic form, allowing someone else to get that slot. Maybe 3D era Cyber Smoke because that smoky body will never be playable again. Of course, if we're going to stick with the idea of the two being gender swaps and this plot about a team heading to an alternate universe to fight a villain, why not play into the gender swap angle more? After all, the game is chock full of gender swaps now, with 4 more being introduced in this very expansion. So, imagine if the plot saw the team sent to help out in the gender swap universe. Maybe we trade in World War II Johnny for Janet Cage. Maybe she gets a chapter using Johnny's moveset, maybe not. She's the one sent to get help from the main timeline, with a Sheer IDU team sent to assist. Sector and Cyrax are now native to her timeline, taking on the Resistance Force roles of Rain and Tanya, fighting alongside Scorpion, Smoke, Takeda, and Janet. The 4 existing ninja gender swaps can be antagonists, or Ermac could be a good guy, as a way to have an Ermac chapter in a plot he doesn't necessarily fit in. Noob Cybots could have 2 incarnations, one from the invading timeline and a female from the gender swap one, with both teaming up at one point for some fun action. And overall, the characters would be more interesting than evil version with a mohawk, since we'd have other actors taking on the roles. Maybe we'd swap 2 core actors around, like Kari Walgren as female Ermac and Jameson Price as male Melina. So yeah, those are the numerous ideas I've been sitting on for a year now for how Chaos Reigns could have been worth the time investment. Now let's skip the epilogue and end things without any satisfying closure. Again, make your own joke. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is... I'm feeling festive, so have a selection of fun videos about why Chaos Reigns is poop from a butt. Merry Christmas.